The Discovery, Chapter 15, Part 2. The rest of David's group rounded the corner and entered the room, drawing Luna's attention away from the screen.
David, what the hell happened?
Richie demanded.
I'm finding out right now!
David quickly replied. After another moment of swiping, David came to the screen he wanted. He made a large swiping motion, making the image appear on the large monitor to the side of the room. The top of the screen read, Damage Report. David and the crew scanned the image for several seconds before Roman finally found something. Right there, in the fuel room, he said, pointing to the starboard section of the ship. It looks like an asteroid. It punched right through our shields and ruptured one of the fuel canisters. That must have been the explosion that woke us all up, Isaac noted.
It depressurized the entire starboard of the ship. The bulkheads on levels 3, 4, 5, and 7 are completely spaced. The reactors work in overtime to keep the engines running. If we don't do something fast, we could have a mini-nuke going off in our basement.
Richie explained.
How the hell did an asteroid even hit us? We specifically chose our flight plan to avoid that.
David wondered out loud.
It doesn't matter now. What matters now is how we deal with it. David, you stay here and monitor the condition of the ship. Let us know if anything changes. Roman, you're on reactor duty. See if you can cool it down. Use the liquid nitrogen if you have to. Isaac, you're on fuselage repair. Get a suit on and get out there to fix it with the plasma torches. I'll be there with the fuel tanks making sure none of that shit goes off on us.
Richie ordered, with calculated determination. Roger. Got it.
On it, boss.
The rest of the humans ran out of the room, leaving Luna alone with David. He quickly swiveled in his chair to look at another screen, leaving Luna to stare at the damage report alone. She inspected the schematics closely, before a flashing red light appeared on a different level of the ship.
Now that doesn't look good. I hope David notices this,
she said, turning to look at David. After a few seconds of digging, David procured a headset from a compartment under the screen, and began talking to his comrades.
Rich, this is David. Do you copy?
David asked.
Roger.
Richie's static voice responded just loud enough for Luna to hear from her position next to David.
Roman?
I'm here.
Isaac?
Yeah, still getting my suit on.
Alright, we're all on the net. If you guys see anything, call it up. I've got almost no power up here, but I'll divert what I can from non-critical systems to wherever you need it.
David said, his steely gaze focused on the screen in front of him.
I've never seen this side of him. He's so focused. He's usually a big goofball of a stallion,
Luna thought, as she watched David work. David directed his friends on what areas needed repairs most desperately, and diverted power to open doors whenever someone needed one open.
David, I need you to divert some power to level 7, section B, door 5A.
Richie called over the net.
Hang on, just a sec. No, it's no good. That door circuits are fried. Can you reroute?
David replied, as he tapped at the screen.
What about 1C?
Richie asked.
Let me see. Okay, I can get it. It should be opening now.
David replied.
Roger, thanks.
David, can you give me some power at the reactor? I can't move the liquid nitrogen without the crane. Roman called.
How much power do you need?
David asked. How much can you give me?
Bro, I'm operating with less power than Apollo 13 here after the explosion.
David replied. Shit. Well, give me what you can. Maybe I can get at least one of these damn tanks to the reactor. Roman answered.
On it. Just a second. And done. Rich, you'd better move fast. That door's gonna close in on you in 1 minute, and I don't know if I can get it back open once it's shut.
David announced.
On it.
Luna was completely transfixed on the marvelous display of communication and brotherhood she was witnessing. She couldn't help but admire the teamwork and efficiency of the human crew. Most ponies would be too terrified at the prospect of death to move so quickly and without question. Sadly, it only made her pity David more. More than once, Isaac or Roman cracked a joke, making even David laugh despite the harrowing circumstances they all faced. And for a while, everything seemed to be working out well. Isaac managed to seal the breach in the ship's fuselage. Rich was able to secure the fuel and keep it from exploding, and Roman was even able to bring the reactor's core temperature down several hundred degrees. Everything seemed to be going well, until the second explosion. The ship rocked and Luna heard a chain of explosions from down the hallway. The force of the first explosion threw her off her hooves and knocked David out of his chair. The sound of rushing air quickly followed, and before Luna could even process what had happened, more alarms blared, and the room was once again bathed in a red hue. Luna scrambled to her hooves to find David already back at his post, yelling into his headset.
Guys, are you okay? Respond!
David barked into the mic.
What the hell was that?
Came a static voice, nearly completely drowned out by the alarms. David looked back at the damage report to find the oxygen cycle room was completely bathed in red lights and warning signs. He cursed under his breath as he looked back at his monitor.
There was a fire in the oxygen cycle room. I didn't catch it. We just lost life support. The whole bow of the ship is getting spaced. The bulkhead doors aren't responding. I've got no power here either.
David responded, his voice slightly panicky.
Roman, how's the reactor? We can deal with everything else as long as that thing doesn't go nuclear.
That reactor's fucked. That explosion blew a hole in the fucking coolant. We gotta get out here now.
Roman called, his voice coming in especially poorly.
Fuck! Everyone get to the escape pod now!
Richie's voice rang out through the static. David didn't wait for another second. He practically jumped off of the chair and sprinted out of the room with Luna trailing close behind. David ran through the many corridors of the dying ship as fast as his legs could carry him, with Luna galloping alongside him. The constant shaking and rocking of the ship threw them both off balance multiple times, knocking David off his feet more than once. Hallway after hallway passed in a seemingly never-ending maze, and before long Luna was winded and lost. She barely managed to keep pace with David, as he jumped over debris and ducked under fallen support beams. The whole while, the sound of explosions in the distance filled Luna's ears, pushing her to keep moving, no matter how much her lungs burned.
This is what I get for eating all of that late-night pudding.
Luna thought to herself as she ran. Finally, David turned into a corridor and ran into a massive doorway. Upon arriving, he frantically pressed a sequence of numbers into the keypad. After a few moments, the motors in the door spun to life, and the airlock slowly opened. David quickly clambered inside as the door was still halfway open, with Luna following in behind. David immediately began prepping the escape pod for departure. He entered a combination of numbers into the keypad and flipped several switches, causing the screen to illuminate a bright red. David quickly moved from one side of the pod to the next, and began prepping the flight computer for launch. He was so preoccupied with the computer that he didn't notice the straining of the motors on the airlock door. Luna turned her head at the strange whirring noise and saw smoke fuming from the airlock door. She quickly ran to David's side to try to get his attention.
David, the door!
Luna shouted. David simply couldn't hear her. He continued on with his prep for another minute before a strikingly loud metallic snap filled the air. He turned to the airlock door to see it slowly sliding back down its rails and closing.
Shit!
David shouted. He quickly turned on his heels and sprinted to the door. He grabbed the handle and tried with all of his might to push the steel door back up. Luna stared in awe as David struggled valiantly to hold the door open. Another second passed, and the voices were heard coming down the hallway.
David!
Hold the door. The ship's gonna blow. Let's get the hell out of here.
I can't hold it!
David shouted back as the door inched further down. David's friends sprinted faster than Luna had ever seen a human move before, and the sound of their footsteps grew louder as they grew closer. She peered under the door as it crawled downwards to see them closing the last 20 feet, then 15, then 10, but it was too late. Luna fell back onto her haunches as the airlock door slammed shut in front of her. David fell to his knees and panted heavily. Only a second later, there was a banging on the door, and Richie could be seen looking in through the glass window on the airlock door.
David!
Richie called out.
One of the motors died. I don't think I can open it.
David shouted through heavy breaths. A look of legitimate fear crept onto Richie's face for the first time, and Luna saw the color drained from his face. For the first time, the most headstrong man she'd ever seen looked terrified. That look only lasted for a moment, and a new look found its place. A look of determination.
David, listen to me. There's a mechanical override on the control panel to your right. I need you to open it up, okay?
Richie said, as calmly as he could. David quickly nodded and moved to the panel. He quickly unscrewed the metal plate on top and opened it, revealing a motherboard with several wires connecting it to the other electrical components on the door.
Alright, I need you to cut the blue wire on the 4th connection bridge, right onto the power hardline conduit.
Richie commanded. David quickly found the wire in question and pulled out his knife. He cut the wire in an instant.
Okay, now I need you to cut the yellow wire in the purple block at the top left.
Richie said. David cut the requested wire.
Okay, got it.
He quickly replied.
Alright, now cross the wires and cycle the power. That should reroute some juice from the pod to the last motor and at least get this door halfway open. Okay, got it.
David said.
Try opening the door.
A mechanical whirring filled the air once more, and the door began to slowly rise. 3 pairs of hands wrapped around the bottom of the door and pulled with all their might to help the door along. David was quick to join while Luna watched intently. The door slowly rose, 1 inch, then 2, then 3, until it was just high enough to crawl under.
Isaac, go!
Richie called out. Isaac moved to crawl under the door, but right as he got his leg under, the motor sputtered and began to die, quickly allowing the door to fall back down. Before Luna could even gasp at the impending amputation about to happen, Roman released his hold on the door and pulled Isaac out from under. David and Richie released their grips just before the door slammed down and shut.
Oh, fuck, the motor died! There's not enough power! Fuck!
David cried out as he punched the panel. Richie thought for a moment before he came up with another idea.
Alright, David, there is a way we can manually open this thing. I need you to...
A massive explosion ripped the hallway open to the empty vastness of space, and all 3 humans flew out into the void in the blink of an eye. David was knocked onto his back by the shockwave, and took a few moments before he rose to his feet. His breaths came quickly and shaky, and as he looked through the glass, he saw the massive hole in the blackness of space. He began to hyperventilate, and he screamed at the glass. David kept on screaming as he pounded on the glass, tears already streaming down his cheeks. Luna stared in abject horror. Her eyes widened, and her tears trembled as she witnessed the moment of David's loss. The death of his only friends. Tears streamed down his face, and he fell to his knees, all the while screaming their names. David fell back into a sitting position against the control panel. He held his head into his hands and sobbed. Luna hesitantly moved to the window to see what was left of the craft. Rearing back on her hind legs, she peered through the glass to see the spacecraft in its dying moments. After a few moments, an automated voice filled the escape pod.
Escape pod automated launch sequence activated. All living souls on board. Launching in 3, 2, 1, launch.
The pod harshly shook as it was jettisoned from the ship and began to fly away. After only a few seconds, the entire vessel turned into a brilliant blue light and exploded. The shockwave immediately slammed into the pod, flinging it off course and into the void. Luna's world faded to black, and before she knew it, she was thrust back into the waking world. Luna awoke with a start, and she panted heavily as she recollected everything she had just witnessed. She took a moment to calm herself down before turning around to the clock to see the time. 3 a.m. Luna looked over to a large bed to her right, finding her sister sleeping soundly. She breathed a sigh of relief and rose to her hooves, almost tripping over midnight in the process.
Oops, sorry about that, Midnight.
Luna whispered to the graphite unicorn. Luna quickly moved to her sister and gently nudged her awake. Celestia murmured.
Sister, wake up.
Luna quietly ordered.
Is it sometime?
Celestia managed to respond as her eyes slowly opened.
No, I have returned from the dreamscape. I need to talk to you about David, now.
Luna whispered.
Oh.
All right.
Celestia said, slowly rising from the bed. Several of Celestia's joints popped as she stretched and slipped off the bed onto her hooves. Luna quickly ushered her out of the room and into the next room over.
What did you find, sister?
Celestia asked, still groggy from just waking up.
With regards to the magical damage, I'm afraid those results are inconclusive. I'm not sure how, but I found myself in a particularly important memory of his. I found no sign of magical damage there, although I admit I was quite preoccupied with what was happening in his memory. Before I could search elsewhere, I was forced out of his mind and back to the waking world.
Luna explained.
What happened?
Celestia pressed.
Well, I now know why he feels so guilty about his friends.
Luna said.
Go on.
Celestia replied, seeming to completely wake up at the news.
Their ship was hit by an asteroid. David and his friends tried to fix it, but as soon as it looked like they would be alright, there was a massive explosion, forcing them to abandon ship. I followed David the whole time. He was the first one to the escape pod, but something went wrong once he was inside. The door closed on its own, locking his friends out. He tried so hard to hold it open, but it was too heavy, and he failed.
Luna trailed off.
What happened next? Sister?
Celestia asked, noticing Luna's downcast eyes.
His friends made it to the door and tried to tell him how to open it. But it didn't work. As they were talking, there was another explosion and they were just gone. Just like that. Their entire lives led to that moment, and in an instant they were gone. It was horrible. And I don't think I can stand to see David like that again. I saw his memory exactly as he remembers it. Even his nightmares do that moment no justice.
Luna replied somberly. Celestia was quiet for a few moments while she thought over Luna's words. Her brow furrowed as numerous possible ideas flowed through her 1,000-year-old mind.
So that's what happened to him.
A new voice said. Both Luna and Celestia whipped their heads to the door to find Midnight looking at them both, sadly. She fell to her haunches, and her eyes dropped to the floor as the princesses quickly closed the distance between them.
Midnight, how long have you been awake? How much did you hear?
Luna asked, her brow furrowing in concern.
Since you stepped on my hoof. I heard everything.
Midnight replied.
This is a difficult situation. Please, let us keep this between ourselves.
Celestia said with a hint of concern.
Of course, Princess.
Midnight replied.
What are we going to do? I'm not sure. Sister, you found absolutely no trace of magical damage anywhere?
Celestia asked.
I did not find anything conclusive. The outside of the ship was nothing but blackness, and I only saw the rooms David was in. However, after seeing his memory, I'm beginning to think Dr. Winnie may have been right. Most ponies would be lucky to come away from that as mentally sound as David is. Is there any way you could search again at a later date?
Celestia asked.
I could. However, delving into one's consciousness takes an extraordinary amount of magic and energy. And I'm afraid I don't have that strength to do it again for at least another week. Lifting the moon will even be challenging in that time.
Luna admitted.
I didn't realize it was such a strain on you.
Celestia said remorsefully.
Midnight, I hate to say this just as much as you hate to hear it, but I'm not sure I can feasibly continue to search in David's mind for magical damage. There's still so much of his consciousness that I haven't seen, and taking time to do this whenever I have the strength will most definitely interfere with my duties as the Princess of the Night. I understand. David doesn't come before Equestria. Is there anything else we can do?
Midnight asked, her tone barely concealing her sadness at the news.
I believe the best option at the moment would be to help him confront his guilt and overcome it like Dr. Winnie suggested. Then again, now that we know exactly why he's kept the circumstances of the crash so secret, I don't think he'll be willing to open up about it very easily.
Celestia admitted woefully.
He believes he is directly responsible for their deaths. I honestly can't blame him for not wanting to discuss it.
Luna responded. A sad silence filled the room for several minutes before Midnight finally spoke.
I think I might be able to get through to him. Are you sure? I know you're in a relationship now, but these are deep wounds we're talking about, Midnight.
Luna said.
I understand that, Princess, but if I'm being honest, I think I'm the only pony that David will talk to about this.
Midnight replied, with determination in her voice.
Very well. How do you plan to do it?
Celestia asked.
I just need some alone time with him.
Midnight replied.
Done.
Together, the Royal Sisters replied. I just now realized that Isaac represents the person from Dead Space. It took me this long. Anywho, let's get on to our fantastic donators. Top donators are 630, BadassWaffle, Only One Thing, Ceru, Orion, IronSky, and Jessie Smith. Matchback 109, JockeTF, Darkside, Rayden, Narwhals, Blackmoonheart, Pastel Skies, Austin Rollins 2, Hexor, Brother Mortar, Omicron, Live, Runeside 9852, Will Chris, Wiki, Rice, Janima, Luigi 88, Shots Across, Big Smoke 369, Bobcat, GGF, Murder Princess, and many more awesome people. Thank you all so much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.